Hi, welcome to the channel. I am Thea and we make math videos. So I am from group 3 and we need to learn bar graph. So the teachers for our lesson today are Glyza Abby A. Virtudazo, ang respectful human ng BSMT 1B. Next, John Zedric D. Jumawan, ang good boy and faithful ng BSMT 1B. At ito naman, si Amber Hope C. Ponisca, ang hardworking student nurse. Si Charles Gabriel B. Jalig, ang goal-driven student ng BSMT 1B. Next, Hannah Ket A. Giles, ang optimistic student ng BSMT 1B. Si Christine Monique S. Layagi naman, ang simple dreamer ng BSMT 1B. Si Angelil Thea Marie M. Villamor, ang conservative and talented girl ng Lapu-Lapu City. Si Earl Maurice J. Roca Mora, ang fiction character lover ng BSMT 1B. At ang pinakahuli and last is Angel Kate O. Ablan, ang small B ng BSMT 1B. So, thanks for watching. So, let's proceed to our lesson.
So good day everyone. So today we will discuss about bar graph. So we already have an idea what is a bar graph. So a bar graph or a bar chart presents categorical data with rectangular bars with heights or lengths proportional to the values that they represent. The bars can be plotted vertically or horizontally.
So, good morning, I'm Emerson Chika, reporting the objectives of the bar graphs. So, this is our objective of the bar graphs. First is to explain the value of graphs in the reports, to understand how to create line and bar graphs, describe the criteria for quality graphs, describe the potential for misleading data, choose the correct graph for different data set, construct bar graph, peak, chart, and line graphs.
So, good day everyone. My name is Charles Gabriel Lig, and I am one of the members of the day that will be presenting the bar graph. So, my topic is all about the history and the development of bar graph. So, in this part, we're going to explore how or who the bar graph who created or someone like that who coined the idea of a bar graph that we're going to talk about. Okay, so a bar graph is a graphic representation that presents data value with equally with rectangles with different heights or lengths to represent their data. So according to many sources, the very first man who coined the idea of a bar graph was William Playfair in the 17th century, 1780 something like that, in his application with the exports and imports of Scotland. So, others say that Nicole Orsim, a French philosopher, has used the idea to plot the velocity of a constantly accelerating object against time. Mind you that Nicole Orsim had the idea or published the idea 300 years before William Playfair, so about in the 14th century pa, something like that. So, mato ilagi ingnan or ilagi basihan is nakabuok si William Playfair or Sim, and we're going to explore both ideas. Slides. So, William Playfair, a Scottish engineer and political economist, considered as the father of practical method of statistics. So, not only did William create or coin down the bar graph, he also actually created also the pie chart or pie graph, or the idea of that. So his creation of a bar graph was actually inspired by the work of Joseph Priestley, which is the innovation of timeline charts, which uses bars for the representation of data. So basically, the Priestley is para siyang timeline lang, that timeline chart. I'm sure we all know what a timeline chart is. pero i-applyan o bars with specific which represents a specific data. So that gave William Playfair an idea. What if the represent not only times or timeline, what if the definitive data or physical data in plot. So this was his very first, this is actually the first bar graph ever created in history daw, according to some many sources. So this was by William Playfair. So this is the exports and imports of Scotland to and from different parts for 1 year, from Christmas in 1780 to Christmas in 1782. So you can see here in this axis, I guess, the name of the places that the imports came from or the exports came from. And this is the amount or the value, I guess, the value of exports and imports in Scotland specific to this. So this is the bars that we represent here. So some of the difference and na-inspire sa timeline ni Joseph Priestley. In this bar chart, Scotland's imports and exports from and to different countries in 1781 are represented. This bar chart has the first quantitative graphical form that did not locate data either in space, as had coordinates in tables, or time, as had Priestley's timeline. So that the difference, no? And this bar chart represented the first quantitative graphical form. So mostly daw sa mga bar graphs sa una or something like a graphical representation of something had to do with space or coordinates. Let's say for example, kanang mapa, kapag sa mga mapa, may coordinates sa kilid, coordinates na specific. Kanang number, longitude o latitude, something like that. Muna ang mga graphical representations sa una. And like a Priestley said, different timeline, something like that. Pero ka William Playfair had a quantitative graphical form, meaning na siya data jud, like a quantitative data. It constitutes a pure solution to the problem of discrete quantitative comparisons, according to Wikipedia. Okay. So 300 years ago, from William Playfair, in the 14th century, as I have mentioned before, the idea of the bar graph had already been introduced and has been published by Jacobus de Sancto Martino and attributed to Nicole Arsim. Nicole Arsim, the French philosopher. So Arsim used the bars to generate a graph of velocity that's continuously varying in time. So this was his graph. Hindi ko kagets pero maningal language, pero I guess kanina din ang axis is the time and the graph represent the amount of velocity that it generated in a specific time. So this was his graph. It's kind of related to physics, no? In this very early graph, Nicole plots time along the horizontal axis and velocity of an object along the vertical axis. So the length of the bar represents the velocity of the object at each moment in time. So basically now let's try to compare the two. So ato makuha nga idea or the difference nila is that from Nicole Arsim, the French philosopher which coined this, find is it's relating to time and velocity. Diba? Ang ato ibasihan is to generate a quantitative form of data. So inani namatay tayo na the velocity, so it doesn't. I mean, it does, kind of, pero not that we can apply in statistics which we are learning right now. So, muna yung difference nila. Okay. Kung tagka William Playfair, nag-use statistics stuff. Like, kani, sabi yung across a number, it's what this country has exported and imported into Scotland. So, muna yung difference na. Mechanical or SEM has something to do with physics, while William Playfair has something to do with statistics. That's why many sources and many people have believed that William Playfair was the very first man to represent a quantitative data or quantitative form of data in a bar graph. That's why he's also called the father of graphical methods of statistics. So that would be all for the history of bar graph. Thank you.
Good day everyone, I am Glyza Abby A. Verdudazo, and today I will discuss about the terms and definitions of a bar graph. Before we begin, let's make a quick recap. What is bar graph? So a bar graph or bar chart is a chart or graph that presents categorical data with rectangular bars with heights or lengths proportional to the values that they represent. The bars can be plotted vertically or horizontally. Based on my research, bar graph has 6 components. First, the title, second, the axis, third, the scales, fourth, the range, fifth, the label, lastly, the key or legend. What are those components? Let's begin. First is the title. So the title tells what the graph is all about. Based on the figure, the title can be found in the upper middle part of the bar graph. Second is axis. The x and y axis. We all know that x-axis is the independent variable and the y-axis is the dependent variable. The horizontal or x-axis represents the categories while the vertical or y-axis represents a value for those categories. Scales and range. So the scale is the numbers that show the units used on the bar graph, and range means all the numbers in a set of data. As you can see in the picture, both the scale and range are located in the vertical axis. What's their difference? Scales is the distance between points on a line. To make it simple, scales use different place value. It could be ones or tens, depending on the number of participants or objects, while range will depend on the place value of the scales. Take a look at our example on the screen. The scale is counting by 10, making our range 0 to 80. Next is label. Both the side and the bottom of the bar graph have a label that tells what kind of data is shown. X-axis describes what each data point on the line represents, and Y-axis shows the numeric value for each point on the line. To properly label a graph, you have to identify which variable the x-axis and y-axis each represent. Don't forget to include units of measure or the scale so learners can understand each quantity represented by those axes. The labels of the bar graph are horizontal axis, vertical axis, title of the bar graph, title of the horizontal axis, title of the vertical axis, and you have to label the categories of the horizontal axis to show what each bar stands for, and scale range on the vertical axis to show the number on each category. Lastly is the key or legend. It explains any additional information included in the graph. Many times, this will show different colors or symbols used to represent different categories. It is needed only when data about more than one category are shown in graph. And that's all for terms or definitions of a bar graph. Thank you!
How do we make a bar graph? So there are 6 steps in making a bar graph. Number 1, collect your data. The first thing you have to do is to collect all of your data. We should remember that a bar graph's goal is to show a comparison among categories. Second, Draw an X and Y axis. This will look like a large L shape as what the illustration was showing. Bar graphs are often drawn when one set of data is expressed as a set of categories and the other axis will be values for the base categories, groups, or periods. Number 3. Label the X-axis. Divide the number of squares across the page by the number of bars you need to draw to find the width of each other. Fourth, label the Y-axis. Divide the highest value of all the bars by the number of squares left above the bottom axis to find what each square represents. Number 5, draw your bars. Extend the base you have marked on the bottom axis to the horizontal line labeled with the value of that bar. Lastly, interpret your data. Now that you have made your bar graph, you can have a better sense of the data because you can visualize it. And that is the 6 steps on making a bar graph.
Hi everyone! So today I'm going to give you an example of horizontal bar graph. So my example is, the University of Cebu Banilad has an election for presidency. For the Student Council of MedTech Department School Year 2021 to 2022. So Mr. Mendez, Ms. Romero, and Mr. Sanchez are the candidates. There are 574 MedTech students voters from all blocks. Today is the final counting. So who will be elected as president? So the data gathered and computation of the election. So the candidates, Mendez, Romero, Sanchez. So for Mr. Mendez, he have 15 voters from Block A, 46 from Block B, 3 from Block C, 42 from Block D. So he have a total of 106 voters. So we convert that into percentage. So it becomes 18.47%. Don't worry, in the next slide I will show you how to convert the total voters into percentage. So for Ms. Romero, 56 voters from Block A, 32 from Block B, 16 from Block C, 6 from Block D. So the total voters she got is 110 voters. In 2%, it becomes 19.16 voters. For Mr. Sanchez, 35 from Block A, 49 voters from Block B, 138 from Block C, 136 from Block D. So the total is 358 voters. So in the percentage, it becomes 62.40%. So now for the computation. So the total voters of the candidate divided by the total voters from all blocks, so it's 574. Then the result is you will times it to 100, so it becomes the percentage of the total voters of the candidate. So now Mendez have 106 voters divided by 574 total students from all blocks, so times 100, it becomes 18.74%. For Ms. Romero, 110 voters divided by 574 total voters times 100, she got 19.16%. For Mr. Sanchez, he have 358 divided by 574 times 100, it becomes 62.40%. Now, therefore, Mr. Sanchez is elected as Student Council President of MedTech Department School Year 2021 to 2022 at University of Cebu Banilad, garnering the highest votes of 62.40% than Ms. Romero and Mr. Mendez. So now, this is what we call the horizontal bar graph. So, the Student Council election for presidency, school year 2021 to 2022. So Mr. Mendez have a total of 18.47% voters. For Ms. Romero, she have 19.16% total of voters. For Mr. Sanchez, 62.40% voters. So therefore, Mr. Sanchez is selected as Student Council President of MedTech Department for the school year 2021 to 2022. So thank you for watching, guys. Goodbye!
So hello, today I will be showing you an example of a bar graph. But before that, let's look at the situation first for us to obtain results and make a bar graph. So this is the situation. Jeff, Peter, John, and Mary are all medical technology students. During their NFE, their proctor gave them a 100-item pre-test before discussing. The next day, the proctor gave them another 100-item test. So these are the scores of Jeff, Peter, John, and Mary from their pre-test, and the other test was given to them. So Jeff got 60 points from the pre-test and 70 points on the other test. Peter got 75 points from the pre-test and 90 points from the test. John's score on both the pre-test and the post-test is the same, which is 55 points, so nothing changed in his score at all. And Mary got 80 points on her pre-test and 95 points on the test. So from the data that was given here, we can now make a bar graph. So this is the bar graph. The vertical axis here, or the y-axis, shows the scores of the students that can get, and the horizontal axis here, or the x-axis, shows the name of the students. The yellow bar here shows the pre-test, and the green bar here indicates that it's the test or the post-test. So now we can clearly understand that Jeff got 60 points in his pre-test and got 70 points in his test, while Peter got 75 points in the pre-test and 90 points in the test. Whereas John here got 55 points in both the pre-test and the post-test. And Mary got 80 points in her pre-test and got 95 points on her post-test. So the use of bar graph, we're able to understand or compare the scores of different students here. So I hope you were able to understand my point. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'll be showing you an example of a bar graph. But before that, let's see the situation, and after that I will show you the bar graph of the given problem. The situation is that we will see the total numbers of those students who have been already vaccinated with the COVID-19 vaccines in our school. So the question is, how many students are being vaccinated with the COVID-19 vaccines in our school? These are the results of those students that already been vaccinated. So this is the bar graph. The vertical axis shows the first dose and the second dose, while the horizontal axis shows the numbers of those students that have been vaccinated. The first dose, the total of students is 245, while the second dose is 155. The key for this is the first dose is the black one, and the second dose is the red one. So in the result, we clearly understand that the given result of the highest total numbers of those students that who have been vaccinated is the black one, or those students that is having the first dose.
So with previous information being said, let us one more dig deeper to bar graph's advantages, disadvantages, and also lastly, its importance in other aspects. So first, let us go to its advantages. So bar graph shows each data category in a frequency distribution, and it displays relative numbers or proportion of multiple categories. It summarizes a large data set in a visual form, and it clarifies trends better than do tables. It also estimates key values at a glance. It permits a visual check of accuracy and reasonableness of calculation. And lastly, it can be easily understood due to widespread use in business and the media. So in summary, bar graph summarizes a large data set in a visual form. That is why comparing between two or several datasets is easy, which leads to better clarified trends than in doing tables. So next, let us go to its disadvantages. Bar graph require additional explanation, and it can be easily manipulated to yield false impression. And lastly, it failed to reveal key assumption, causes, effect, or patterns. So it needs additional written or verbal explanation in a way that it only shows categorical data but not the cause and effect of it. That is why it needed to be explained to how those data are being achieved. So after knowing the advantages and disadvantages of bar graphs, let us go now to its importance in other aspects. So as you can see in the first visual illustration, it represents how bar graphs are useful in economics. Bar graphs are commonly used in financial analysis for displaying data. A stock volume chart is a commonly used type of vertical bar graph. So in economics, bar graphs are used to identify level of economical growth. An example of this is statistical analysis that depicts a probability distribution in some data. So now let us go to the second one in health and how important bar graphs play in regard to health. So it is used to present fact in a clear and understandable way and contain original illustration created to specific requirements to make sure that the result of the project are entirely directed around you and your work. So in health though, it's not actually directed to curing the patients, but it shows which aspect of the healthcare do we need to focus on, and with that, we can achieve better healthcare services. So now let us go to the last one, which is the education. It shows difference between the two and it represents the progress made in student achievement levels over that time. So, bar graphs in education are used to identify or to help not only the school administration but also the government to cater students and facilities and faculty needs. So these are the examples of how bar graphs are useful not only for educational purposes but within our society.
I hope you learned all about the bar graph, and that would be all. Thanks for watching. Bye!